My mother skipped my baby shower because she needs to watch her dogs. She was livid when everyone knew I gave birth except her. I am the youngest of 4 siblings and the only one having children. My brothers Noel and Frankie and my sister Alma have all said they don't plan on having kids. So when I got pregnant after 3 years of trying, this was it. The only grandchild my mother would ever get. My father passed 4 years ago and I miss him every day, but especially now because he would have been the kind of grandfather who cleared out the spare room before the baby was even born. I have been low contact with my mother for years. No texting for 3 years. We only speak on the phone and I visit maybe twice a year for 2 nights maximum. When I told her I was pregnant, she said, "Oh." Then she asked what we were going to name the baby. I said we hadn't discussed names yet and probably wouldn't until closer to the due date. She got quiet and said, "Oh, okay," in a tone that made it clear she wasn't asking out of excitement. She was asking because she needed to know if I was naming the baby after my father's side of the family, which she has never liked. 2 months later, she called and asked about the name again. I said we still didn't know. She got irritated and said, "Well, you need to figure that out because people are going to ask." I said people can wait. She didn't like that. My partner Luca and I planned a baby shower. We sent invites to about 30 people. My brothers said they'd be there. Alma flew in from out of state. Luca's parents drove 4 hours to come. My mother called a week after she got the invite and said, "Sorry, I can't attend. I have to watch my dogs. Hope you understand." She has 2 small dogs that she has left alone an entire weekend before to go to her neighbor's birthday party. But my baby shower was apparently the one event that required her to stay home and guard them. I said, "Okay." She said, "You're not upset, are you?" I said, "No." She said, "Good, because I would hate for you to make this into something it's not." Then the day before the shower, my mother sent me a text. The first text she had sent me in 3 years. It said, "Just to let you know, here's the code to my garage. You'll need to know it. I'm telling you this because you are the executor of my estate." That was it. No good luck tomorrow. No wish I could be there. A garage code and a reminder that I have responsibilities to her. On the day of my baby shower, she was responsible for nothing. But the day before, she needed me to know that when she dies, I'm the one who has to deal with her house. The shower was beautiful. Luca's mother made a banner by hand. Alma organized a game that made everyone cry. My brothers sat in the corner eating cake and arguing about stroller brands like they had been researching them for months. I felt loved by every person in that room. My mother was not in that room. After the shower, I didn't call her to tell her how it went. She didn't call me to ask. 3 months later, the baby came. A girl. We named her after Luca's grandmother. We didn't tell anyone the name until she was born. The first people I told were Luca's parents because they were at the hospital. Then I called Noel, then Frankie, then Alma. I didn't call my mother. Not because I was punishing her. Because she had set the terms of this relationship years ago and I was finally following them. She wanted distance. She wanted phone calls only. She wanted to skip the shower. So I gave her what she built. 2 days after the baby was born, my mother found out. Frankie's girlfriend Mia posted a picture with the baby and tagged Frankie in it. My mother saw it. She called Noel first. She said, "Why didn't anyone tell me?" Noel said, "We figured you'd call when you were ready since that's usually how it works with you." She said, "I'm her mother. I should have been the first to know." Noel said, "You skipped the baby shower." She said, "That has nothing to do with this." Noel said, "It has everything to do with this. You chose your dogs over her shower and you sent her a garage code the night before like she's your property manager. You don't get to do all of that and then be upset you weren't on the phone list." She called Alma next. Alma said the same thing in fewer words. "You weren't there for any of it, so why would you expect to be there for this?" My mother called me that night. I let it ring. She called again the next morning. I let it ring again. The next afternoon, Quintessa called Frankie. He told me about it after because he wanted me to know what she was saying. She didn't say hello when he picked up. She said, "Tell Mia to take that picture down." Frankie actually laughed. Not to be mean, but because he was so caught off guard by how she opened with that. He said it's Mia's page. She posted a picture of a baby she held. That's not a crime. Quintessa said your sister had a baby and nobody told me, and now it's all over the place for me to find out like a stranger. Frankie said you were invited to the shower. You picked your dogs. What did you think was going to happen after that? She hung up on him without saying goodbye. Frankie texted Mia after, just in case Quintessa tried to reach out to her directly. Mia said she's not going to bully me into deleting a picture of a baby I love. Then Quintessa called Alma. Completely different tone. No demands, no sharp edge. She was soft, almost sweet. Alma said it actually made her skin crawl a little because she knew it was a strategy, not a feeling. Quintessa said, "I just want to meet my granddaughter. Can you talk to your sister for me?" Alma paused before answering because she wanted to choose her words carefully. Then she said, "You have her number. You called her twice already." Quintessa's voice got tighter and she said she won't answer. And Alma, in that quiet, steady way she has when she's being completely serious, said then maybe sit with that for a minute and ask yourself why. Alma told me Quintessa went quiet after that. Not angry quiet. The kind of quiet where someone hears something true and doesn't know what to do with it. Quintessa finally said she had to go and hung up, so she called me again. I let it go to voicemail. She left one this time. 3 minutes long, controlled, tight, like she had practiced. She said she didn't understand what she did to deserve being treated this way. She said she had always been there when it mattered. She said missing one event shouldn't mean she gets cut out of the biggest moment of her daughter's life. She said she felt like she was being punished. In 3 minutes, she didn't say the word shower once. She didn't mention the garage code. She didn't say sorry. Every sentence started with I feel, I don't understand, I deserve. It was 3 minutes of her talking about herself and calling it love. Luca was sitting on the bed next to me when I played it. When it ended, he looked at me and said, "She said she's always been there when it mattered. Can you name one time she was?" I sat there thinking. The last 5 years, since my father died. The pregnancy scare when I spent 2 days thinking I was losing the baby. My surgery 3 years ago. The move into our house. My graduation. I went through all of it. Every hard day. I couldn't name one. Not one time in 5 years where Quintessa was there when it mattered. The woman on that voicemail said she had always shown up. The truth was she hadn't. She just believed she had because believing it was easier than looking at what she actually did, which was nothing. That night my phone buzzed. A text from Noel. She called me again. She's telling people you're keeping the baby from her. I felt my chest tighten. Not guilt. I hadn't kept the baby from anyone. I had just stopped putting in effort that was never returned. Quintessa wasn't just upset. She was building something. A version of events where she was the loving grandmother being blocked by her cold, ungrateful daughter, and she was telling that version to anyone who would listen. I told Luca I needed to call her, not to apologize, to say what I should have said years ago. He said you don't owe her a conversation, but if you're going to have one, have it on your terms. Then before I could dial, another text. From Quintessa. The second in 3 years. Your father would be so disappointed in how you're treating me. I read it once and went still. The sting was the deep kind. The kind only your mother can make sting. Then it turned into something hotter. She used him. She took the one person who would have shown up for everything. The man who would have built the crib with his own hands and driven through a storm to be at that shower, and she used him like a weapon. I called Alma. I read the text out loud. The line went quiet for a long time. Then Alma said, she used Dad. She actually used Dad. I said she's been holding him like a card she could play, and she finally played it. Alma said, do not let her win with that. Dad would have been at the shower. Dad would have held the baby first. After I hung up, I sat at the dining table and pulled out a notebook. I made a list. Not for anyone else. Just for me. Every moment I needed my mother and she wasn't there. The pregnancy scare, the surgery, the move, holidays she canceled, phone calls where she talked about herself for 40 minutes and hung up without asking me a single question. The time I told her I was struggling and she said everyone struggles and changed the subject. The list went back years. The shower wasn't even the worst thing on it. It was just the most recent, the most visible. When my dad was alive, he filled in the gaps. He called when she didn't. He showed up when she wouldn't. He was the bridge. When he died, those gaps stopped getting filled, and I finally saw the full picture of what my mother's love actually looked like when nobody was covering for her. Luca read over my shoulder. When I leaned back, he said, you should tell her all of this, face to face, before she convinces herself she's the one who was wronged. I picked up my phone and called Quintessa. She answered on the first ring. I almost laughed. 2 days of calling me, and when I finally called her, she was right there. I didn't let the call breathe. I said, you want to meet her? Fine. Come this weekend. We're going to talk first. Just you and me, and you're going to listen. She said, I don't need conditions to see my own granddaughter. I said, you do now. The line went quiet. Then she said, fine. I said Saturday, 10 in the morning. Don't be late. Then I hung up. My hands were shaking, but my voice hadn't been. I called Noel, Frankie, and Alma, and told them all the same thing. She's coming Saturday. I need you to know in case she calls you with her version after. They all said the same thing in different ways. We're with you. The days went fast. Luca asked Wednesday if I wanted him in the room. I said no. If you're there, she'll perform. She'll cry. She'll act like I'm ganging up on her. I need it to be just us so she can't hide behind an audience. He nodded and said he'd be upstairs with the baby. Thursday, Quintessa called. Her voice was different, lighter, almost cheerful. She said I'm bringing a gift for the baby. I found the cutest little outfit. Then she said, see, this is going to be nice. I don't know why you had to make such a big deal out of everything. In her mind, it was already over. She thought showing up with a gift bag was the same as showing up when it counted. That gap between what she thought was enough and what actually was enough was the whole problem. That had always been the whole problem. Friday came and went mostly quiet. Saturday morning, I was up before the baby. I felt calm, the kind that comes from knowing exactly what you're going to say. Luca came down with the baby, and I felt this wave of something solid move through me. This was my family. This was what I built. He kissed the top of my head and said, I'll be right upstairs. I made coffee. I set out 2 mugs by the machine, one for me and one for her. Even now, I was still going to offer my mother a cup of coffee in my home. I wasn't doing this to be cruel. I was doing this to be honest. I sat at the dining table and waited. At exactly 10, the doorbell rang. Quintessa was standing there holding a gift bag with tissue paper coming out the top, smiling like this was Christmas morning. She stepped inside and said, nice place, like she hadn't been here before even though she had. She set the bag on the counter and reached for a hug, and I let her, but I didn't hold on. I pointed to the table. I said, sit down. We need to talk before anything else happens. Her smile tightened. I sat across from her. I said, I need to say some things, and I need you to let me finish before you respond. She crossed her arms and said, go ahead. 2 words, flat, like she was doing me a favor by letting me speak in my own home. I said, when I told you I was pregnant, you said, oh, that was it. Oh, like I told you I bought a new lamp. She said, that's not fair. I was surprised. You can't hold a reaction against me. I said, I asked you to let me finish. She pressed her lips together. Then she waved her hand forward like a queen giving permission to a servant to keep talking. I kept going. I said, 2 months later you called and asked about the name again. When I said we still hadn't picked one, you got irritated. You said I needed to figure it out because people were going to ask. You weren't asking because you were excited. You were worried I'd name the baby after Dad's family. You've never liked them and you couldn't stand the thought of your granddaughter carrying one of their names. The air in the room changed. She put both hands flat on the table and said, that is not true. I said, then who were the people going to ask you about my baby's name? Who needed an answer that you couldn't give? She opened her mouth, closed it, said nothing. I kept going. I said, you told me you couldn't come to the shower because of the dogs. The same dogs you left alone for a weekend to go to your neighbor's birthday party. Her eyes flicked to the side. She said, that was different. That was close by. Your shower was a drive. I said, Luca's parents drove 4 hours. Alma flew in from out of state. You live 40 minutes away. She had no answer. She straightened up and said, I'm not going to sit here and be put on trial. I said, you're not on trial. I'm telling you what happened and asking you to hear it. She blinked. I think she expected me to back down. I would have a year ago, 2 years ago, every year before this one, but not today. I pulled out my phone and found the garage code text. The first text in 3 years. I read it out loud. Every word. The code, the executor part, all of it. When I finished, I set the phone on the table screen up, like evidence, because it was. I said, the night before my baby shower, the only thing you had to say to me was a garage code and a reminder that I'm your executor, not good luck, not I love you. Her jaw tightened. She said, I was being practical. Someone needs to know that code. Her voice was quieter now, like she could hear herself reaching for an excuse and she knew it wasn't going to be enough. I said, and someone needed a mother at her baby shower, but you sent me a garage code instead. The room went quiet, the heavy kind of quiet. She didn't move. She didn't speak. For the first time since she walked through my front door, she wasn't performing. I wasn't done. I said, you texted me that Dad would be disappointed in how I'm treating you. She shifted in her chair. Her eyes dropped for just a second before coming back up, but she didn't deny it. She didn't say I never sent that or you're taking it out of context. She just sat there. I said, Dad would have been at the shower. He would have driven here the night before to help set up. He would have shown up with more stuff than we needed and rearranged tables and tasted the food before anyone else got to, and made sure every single chair was in the right spot because that's who he was. He would have held her before anyone else. He would have been the first one to hold her, and he would have cried the whole time. Not quiet tears, the real kind. The kind where your whole face changes and you don't even care who sees because you're so full of something good that it just comes out of you. My voice cracked on that part, and I let it. I didn't try to smooth it over or pretend it didn't happen. I let the crack sit there because it was real, and everything I was saying was real, and I was done being polished and careful in front of this woman. I said, he wouldn't have asked about the name to make sure it wasn't from your side of the family. He would have loved whatever we chose because it was his granddaughter's name. The name could have been anything, and he would have said it over and over like it was the best word he ever heard. You don't get to use him against me. Not when you're the one who didn't show up. Her eyes filled with tears. Not the kind she uses for sympathy. The kind where she dabs at the corner with one finger and sighs so you know she's hurting. These came up fast, and she couldn't stop them. Her chin trembled and she pressed her lips together, and then she said very quietly, I miss him too. I said, I know you do, but missing him doesn't mean you get to speak for him, especially when what you're saying he'd feel is the opposite of who he was. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, not carefully, not the way she usually does it where every motion is controlled and precise, just like someone too tired to care how it looked. For a moment she looked smaller than I had ever seen her. Not small like weak, small like someone who had been holding herself up so tight for so long that the second she let go of even one piece of it she started to fold. Her shoulders came down, her hands dropped into her lap, then she said something I didn't expect. She said it quietly, looking at the table, looking at some spot between her hands and the edge of the wood like she was seeing something there that I couldn't see. He would have made me go to the shower. He always made me go to things. The room went still. That one small, honest, broken sentence cracked something open. Without him, she didn't know how to be part of this family. She didn't know how to show up. She didn't know how to walk through the door of her own daughter's baby shower and sit down and be present and be warm. Dad knew how to do that. He did it without thinking. The same way he breathed. He was the bridge. He called when she didn't. He remembered birthdays and drove to see us and said we're going. Get in the car when she would have stayed home. He was the thing that held her to the rest of us. When he died, that bridge collapsed, and she didn't know how to build a new one. So she stood on her side of the gap and watched the distance grow and did nothing. And the nothing looked like not caring. The nothing looked like choosing dogs. The nothing looked like garage codes and cold reactions and silence. She looked up and said, I don't know how to do this without him. Something shifted in my chest. Not forgiveness. I want to be clear about that. It was understanding. The why was sad. The why was really sad, but it didn't erase what happened. I let that understanding sit next to the hurt and the tiredness because that's how real feelings work. They don't cancel each other out. They pile up. Then I spoke. I said, I hear that, and I believe you. She lifted her chin a little, like maybe this was the part where I let it go. I didn't. I said, but you still made choices. You chose the dogs over the shower. You chose a garage code over a kind word. You chose to text me that Dad would be disappointed instead of calling and saying you were scared or sad or that you didn't know how to be part of this. You could have said any of that at any time. I would have listened. I would have. But you didn't say any of that. You didn't try. And I'm not going to pretend those choices didn't happen just because the reason behind them is sad. She didn't argue. She didn't fire back. She didn't cross her arms or wave her hand or do any of the things she does when she's about to redirect. She just sat there. The tears fell and she didn't wipe them this time. She let them fall, and she nodded, just barely. The smallest nod I have ever seen. The room was quiet for a long time after that. I stood up. I said, she's upstairs. If you want to meet her, you can. But this is the beginning of something new between us. Not a reset. Not going back to how it was. Something new. And it starts with you being honest with me the way I just was with you. She nodded again. Bigger this time. Still not words, but real. I called up the stairs for Luca. He came down with the baby in his arms. Quintessa stood. Her hands were shaking. Luca placed the baby gently into her arms. The way you hand someone something precious when you're not sure they know how fragile it is. Quintessa brought her close and just looked. She said the baby's name out loud for the first time, softly, like a promise she wasn't sure she knew how to keep. I stood there a few feet away with Luca beside me, and I watched my mother hold my daughter. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I didn't rush over and put my arm around her. I just stood there. The gift bag was still on the counter. The coffee in the second mug had gone cold. Nothing was decided. We would see what she did next.